Hi, this is Mary Susan from Jessamine County Adult Education Skills U, and I'm beginning a new unit on solving algebra word problems. Although you'll see word problems throughout the entire GED test, I'm going to be focusing on a few problems that mostly are not covered in any other unit of study. So the first problem I want to look at is a fairly easy substitution problem, but because it's surrounded with so many words, it can be overwhelming. So let's stick through the reading part just enough until we can break it down and get to the core pieces of the problem. Y grams of water per X bottles of detergent is described as this equation. If Rob plans to use this large amount of grams of water, how many bottles of detergent will he need? Now, I read the problem like that in kind of like in chunks in order to not overwhelm myself by reading every little part. I see that this is the formula that's going to be needed to use in the problem. So I've copied that over, and then I want to substitute the amount that's given in the rest of the problem for one of these numbers. So I've made a little note here that Y is the grams of water and X is the grams of detergent. So Y grams of water, so Y water per X bottles of detergent, so X is the detergent, has this formula. So if I keep the right-hand side the same and just substitute the amount that they've given me for Y, if Rob plans to use this many grams of water, so I'll substitute that number for water. Now I have my equation completely written out with all the information from the problem. So since there's nothing to do, there's no amounts here that we can work by regular order of operations, we'll start doing the opposite operations, because since anytime they give you the answer to a problem, you solve that by doing the opposite. So I've also made a note here of the last four operations in the order of operations: multiply and divide, whichever comes first, and add and subtract, whichever comes first. So do I have any add or subtract in the problem? Yes, I have 45 plus this multiplication problem. So instead of adding 45, I'm going to subtract 45 from both sides. If I subtract 45 from this side, it will cancel out or equal 0. When I subtract 45 from this side, I'll get this amount. And I've written that equal to the part that's left on the right side. So the last step I need to do is separate the number from the letter X. I'm going to do that because if these are multiply, then if I divide by the 340.194, that side will cancel just so that X is by itself. If I multiply this side by 340.194, give you a second to try to catch up with that. Then X will be equal to 10.994. So does that answer our question? How many bottles of detergent will be needed? So any amount over 10 will cause us to need another bottle of detergent. So we're going to need 11 bottles. Now you may say, well, of course it's 11 bottles. 9 makes the number round up, so it would round up to 11. And that's true, but I also want you to think about the fact that any number, even if this was 10.1, we would need 11 bottles because there would be 10 would be full and we would still have more. So we'd have to have another bottle. Okay, in our second question, this is a very common algebra question, is to write out a long list of things that will be done in one problem. But let me read it through and then we'll break it down into individual parts. 8 times the sum of a number and 4 is 176. What is the number? So let's start out with the first two words is 8 times. So let's show that with parentheses. We can't use an X for times anymore since when we have missing numbers in the problem and we have to write a variable, a lot of times they choose the letter X. So we'll have to show multiply with parentheses. Then we have the sum, that would be add. We're going to add a number, so we have to write down a letter that we're going to add. So let's use X, and we're going to add that to 4. And 4 is means equal 176. 176. Okay, so let me rewrite that a little closer together here. I'm going to be multiplying the sum of X and 4, and then it's going to equal 176. So in the usual order of operations, we deal with parentheses first. So in the parentheses, we have X plus 4. And we can't add that, so we're going to have to do something else to solve that. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 8 times each thing in the parentheses. And I'm going to take a minute and show you how that's going to work. If we had 2 times 3 plus 4, then we would take 2 and multiply by 7. 3 plus 4 is 7. So 2 times 7 would be 14. If we multiply the 2 times 3 and get 6, and then multiply the 2 times the second number in parentheses, 2 times 4 would be 8. That also equals 14. So since we don't know what this number is, we can multiply 8 times each one of these and then add afterwards. So let's see if we take 8 times X, it will look like this, plus 8 times 4, look like that. And if that equals 176, then our equation is worked as much as we can, because now we don't know what to multiply in order to add to get the numbers. So now let's start doing the opposite of the order of operations. So the last thing in order of operations is add and subtract. So instead of adding 32, if we subtract 32 from both sides, it will cancel from this side of the problem, and 176 minus 32 is 144. So now we have 8x is equal to 144. I should have written that in there. Well, you wouldn't really have to, but I do want to write that. X is equal to 144. Okay. So now I need to separate the 8 from the x. So I'm going to be dividing by 8 on both sides. So when you divide by 8 on this side, it will cancel out or equal 0. And when I divide 8 on this side, x will be equal to 18. In our next problem, we have the quotient, that's divide, of 12 and 4. So if I do a division problem with 12 and 4, it will look like this. And if I increase that, that will be add, increase by a number, so x is equal, well, by a number to equal the product, so I'm going to be multiplying 26 and 3. Okay. So I'm going to move this a little closer together. So there's my equation. And I'm going to look and see if there's anything I can solve before I start doing the opposite. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 26 times 3 is 78. So now that's as far as I can work the problem. So I'll have to start doing the opposite operations. So this problem has add x, but it has 3 plus x. So instead of doing 3 plus, I can do 3 minus, or minus 3. So if I subtract 3 from both sides, it will leave x all by itself on the left and give me 75 to equal x. So here's a practice problem for you to do. I'm not going to be ending this video with practice problems. I usually end a video with a screen full of practice problems and then do a follow-up. But in this video, I'm actually going to just give you this one practice problem, and then we're going to work it together. And I'll be doing the full screen of practice problems in every other video so that there'll be more problems to alternate between for you to work. So take a moment and pause and answer this question, and then come back and we'll do it together. So the difference means subtract, and we're going to be subtracting twice a number, so that's 2 times a number and 10. So if I'm going to be subtracting those two, I'm going to put the subtract here. Okay, so the difference, subtract 2 times a number and 10, and that is equal 38. Okay, so there's nothing that I can do before I start doing the opposite operations. So if you didn't get the equation written out before, write it out now and pause the video and see if you can solve the equation. So instead of subtracting 10, if I add 10 to both sides, I'll have 2x is equal to 48. And if I divide both sides by 2, then x will be by itself and it will equal 24. So I hope that you'll join me for my second video on algebra word problems. I'm going to be looking at the number that's missing from the mean. This is the only type of problem that I'm going to be looking at that could be contained in another unit. If you were doing mean, median, and mode, it's possible that you might do the missing number from the mean. But I'm going to include it in this video in order just to focus on this problem in case it's not included in the video that you watch on that or study in that information. I've seen some books that do mean, median, and mode and do not cover this. So that's what I'll be focusing on in my next video. Thank you.